This is devastation. Everything's been destroyed. I think of the community, I think of the people who've been engaged. It's so out of control because we've had literally decades of not managing the forest. We've hurt wildlife diversity, we've hurt soil, plant health, and I'm not saying cows are the solution, I'm saying they can be part of that. Grazing can be a solution, controlled burns can be a solution. People shouldn't think this is a Dave Daley got his cows killed problem. This is everyone's issue. There's an opportunity for us to work together. But I sure wish I'd get some help from the state and the feds to say, we're going to support you. I think Californians are willing to listen. It's not about my cows. It's about the loss of their homes. Let's not study this for 5 years. Let's find 2 or 3 things that we can do tomorrow. Well, good evening, and thanks for having me this evening to Care. I'm here to talk with you tonight, maybe a little more, we'll say both locally and globally, in terms of some of the issues we're faced with and where we take them from here. I live about 3 hours north of you in Orville. Maybe it's a little further than that, but as a crow flies, not that far. And I actually feel a bit of a kindred spirit with the people in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada that kind of understand that transition land that goes from the foothills up to the high country, the people who were involved in the logging and timber business, people involved in ranching. I think we have a lot of similar values. My family came to the Orville area in about 1850 as poor Irish immigrants just trying to figure out how to make it. They passed all the fertile ground in the valley where they could have probably made a better living, thinking they were going to get rich in the foothills. And we've been there ever since. I think they were hunting for gold, but they found a great lifestyle, but not an easy one. And I think if you travel the front range of the Sierra, at least from this part of Butte County down through your geography, your place, you'll find it's really comparable people who work hard, want to do the right thing. It's important to them to be part of the community and to support the community, and they find it to be increasingly challenging. I know you had the rim fire about 9 years ago, and some of you may know that I dealt through the August complex, which was initially the Bear Fire 2.5 years ago, and it completely changed everything about my ranch. It changed the community. It changed what we're doing as a society about a challenge that is growing every year because we aren't doing the right things and we aren't doing enough. The Bear Fire, sparked by lightning, like many of them, dry fires, burnt for about a week without suppression, and then in front of a major north wind jumped the middle fork of the Feather River, and it burnt about 200,000 acres in 12.5 or maybe 15 hours, and was really stopped by Lake Orville after running through our mountain range of over 100,000 acres. Killed 350 cows of 400 I had on National Forest and Sierra Pacific land, all of them due to calve or having baby calves, so essentially 700 head. So I think I can speak to devastation. People asked about, well, did it get your home? And I said, my daughter's the one who answered, said, no, that'd be easy. This is much bigger than that. This is an ecosystem that is devastated for generations, if it ever recovers. It's changed everything I do and think about and how I approach issues in the future because it's dramatic. So the destruction and the magnitude of what we're seeing is growing every year. Last year we burnt 4 million plus acres in California, and I have little hope that that's going to change for a variety of reasons, but the primary one is we haven't changed our approach. We haven't changed our approach as legislators, as regulators, as citizenry, as environmentalists, as ranchers. We have decided that we're going to invest a lot of time in blaming one another and not moving forward with solutions. And I can't tell you I don't get angry about this stuff. And I know many of you in the room tonight probably have shared my frustrations with what you think is absolute incompetence at a variety of levels. And I don't disagree with that, but I also think we need to recognize this is a complex issue. And the way we've approached it as producers, whether it's of timber or of cattle, I think that we better know that we have to change the way we're looking at this issue. And we're going to have to think about this in a different manner because our ability to reach the public is becoming diminished. And the way we seem to want to do it now is fight like hell. You know, and in the ranching community, and I don't blame you, I feel the same way, but in the ranching community, what I like to say is we're a little bit like Custer. We get the wagons all in a circle. The only problem is then we shoot at each other inward. You know, we never think about what the true challenge is because we're so sure that our point's right and we have to make it that we aren't willing to listen to people who may have a different viewpoint. So what we end up with is more conflict. People on opposite sides of issues. I am so tired of, well, is it fuel load reduction? Is it, are we supposed to log? Or is it climate change? And all the wasted time we've spent on an issue that doesn't offer solutions. It just allows people to raise money and argue. I think the other issue that I find really interesting for me, and if I hadn't left Butte County and traveled a little bit and seen other folks and worked with other people from different backgrounds, is that we can't understand why they don't care. We can't understand why they don't get that this is so personal to us. And I think part of it is we don't understand their issues. So we naturally end up trying to focus on our personal issues and our challenges, and we forget about those that they're facing. So if you're an assemblyman from South Central LA, why should you really care about Tuolumne County? Give me a reason. Well, you say, well, we might ship them lumber. Well, you might, but their major problem might be food insecurity, crime, drugs, name the list of all the things that they are faced with in a metropolitan area. They really don't have time to worry about whether your little mill is going to go out of business. And I know that sounds harsh or sad, but you probably aren't worrying about them any more than they're worrying about you. So somehow we have to bridge a divide where it's important. When we go on the attack at the very beginning, it really puts people on the defensive, and there's not an opportunity to build relationships where you can actually work on issues with common ground. And I don't think we do that very well as an industry as a whole, because we're so used to talking with each other, we have no idea why people don't understand us, so we automatically dismiss them, discount them, attack them, say they're wrong, rather than trying to listen. This fire has really been devastating to me personally, devastating to my family, but it has changed the way I approach some of these issues. One of the bottom ones, and it's an old saying and I love it and it's true, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. We spend all our time trying to say, here's the science. Here's the science and the facts. If we don't remove these trees, if we don't graze, this is going to happen. Here's our data. I hate to tell you, but the public doesn't care. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Because you know what? Your science might be really good science. Somebody on the other side, whatever the heck that means, is going to have other science. And it's going to conflict. And so they're going to say, well, I don't know, I trust the people I like. If I like them, then the data's good and I'll believe them. If I don't like them, the other side's right. We have invested far too little in trying to build relationships with people who don't think like us. And it takes effort and it takes time and it's frustrating and it opens doors. So this fire, through the California Cattlemen's Foundation, they were able to bring a fairly large chunk of Governor Newsom's staff here to the ranch, right where I'm standing. And that included Secretary of Natural Resources, Secretary of Agriculture, Deputy Secretary for Forests, Deputy Secretary for Climate, and a variety of other people, including the now head of the United States Forest Service, Randy Moore, who was here a week just before he was appointed Chief of the Forest Service in DC. And we took him up and we showed him the fire. We showed him the devastation firsthand. We didn't judge, we didn't try and set it up like this is somebody's fault. We just said, here, let's go up and see the level it was. And we had a really good dialogue with people that I think naturally many in my community would say, you went with them in the same van, right? Those aren't your people. What are you doing? You switch sides? I think it doesn't mean we found a solution, but at least we're starting to hear the things that we need to hear. Now, I kind of challenged that group and said, okay, great. That was great. That was a great tour. We all agreed. We got to do something. What are we going to do next year? It's coming up in May that shows we actually made progress. Talking's one thing, but at least I think they began to understand, and they never would have done it had we not got on the ground in common ground. And I hear that every time. You've got to get people out to see it. Don't try and tell them from a distance. For sure, don't yell at them because you aren't going to get anywhere, because it shuts people down immediately. I think there's this opportunity to build some dialogue and find some common solutions. And the place that we really all of a sudden have huge allies with that never existed before were all the small communities. Because it used to be about the forest burning and maybe my cows and maybe your logging, your timber operation, but it wasn't about their homes. Now it's about their houses. Now they can't get insurance. Now it's real. So we got to make it, because it's real, about the citizenry of California. This is something that will impact all of them. I'm waiting for the Oakland Hills to burn again. I flew over it the other day. Or all of the Bay Area, which is just set for horrible conflagration, which will be maybe not as many acres, but far more devastating in terms of lives. And I don't want to use tragedy, but unfortunately it seems to be what gets attention. So what we need to do is focus, how do we stop that tragedy? And we can't do that unless we look for solutions. So the obvious things, and solutions are, whether they're obvious or not, to me, we are not building relationships which allow us to make small progress. We need to think about the way we phrase things. Fuel load reduction is more palatable than logging. Sorry. That doesn't mean I wouldn't be proud. I'm proud. I would be proud to be part of the timber industry. You should be proud of logging, but you have a story to tell. We can help protect California from fire. Catastrophic wildfire, if you let us do the right thing that we know how to do, if we work with the history of the land to do it appropriately, we can be people who help all the community. And again, think about this. It's important, but don't say it's about because I'm staying in business, because everybody's worried about staying in business. Say it's because it's really important for the ecosystem and the health of the land and the local community and protecting people's lives and protecting people's homes. Make it about the community instead of yourself. And it changes the way people are willing to listen. And I think if you can build those relationships, it will be an incredible opportunity to find ground with people you didn't think thought like you. And they may not. And I've learned to limit my issues, because I guarantee some of the people I meet with, I don't agree on a lot of issues. I promise you that. Let's not start with what we disagree on. Let's start with what we agree on. And if you do that and say, okay, there's 20% of this we're never going to, I will not agree with you if you tell me I can't cut a tree. I will not agree with you if you tell me I can't graze cows. I mean, bottom line, that's my core values. I'm not changing them. But I'm not going to start there. I'm going to start with, well, what do we all want? Well, we want a healthy ecosystem. We want community. We want jobs. Let's build from the beginning, because you know how it works is you almost take the air out of the room if they find you are not an extremist. And they aren't extremists. You build relationships, and I don't think we as a community do that well. Stay off the damn social media posting nasty stuff about people you're gonna have to work with. What good do you think you're doing? You aren't helping anybody, except maybe making yourself feel better. I think what you're really doing is a disservice to our community by not being able to say, hey, I don't agree with them on these issues, but here's one I think we have common ground in. So all these fun little posts about making fun of people who live in the city, they have more votes than you. Forgot to tell you. Why are you angering them? Why don't you want them to be on your side? Realize that they're good people. They're people who want to understand, but they don't. And if they don't like you, why should they bother? One of the things we all deal with, whether it's local, state, or federally, is working through the political system. And it's not easy, it's not complicated. I have friends who are politicians at various levels that I work with well. I have some I work with and I won't call them friends. It's just part of life, right? It's what we do. But I am reminded of the joke that I've told before about lawyers. We can tell it about politicians tonight, because my guess, you're all in the room since it's an election year. And what's the difference between a politician and a dead cat in the road? Ah, right, there's skid marks before the cat. Nobody stops for a politician. I say that in jest, but honestly, I don't envy some of the decisions you're faced with and the way that you have to campaign to move things. I'm a little frustrated in politics from an observing standpoint, is that if you are reasonable, intellectual, somewhat moderate, although I'm obviously an R, you really get marginalized fairly quickly. You know, to be able to work collaboratively was an art form that I think we've lost to a certain degree, and it's a bit disappointing to me. I was in DC this couple of years ago and happened to have a meeting with Mr. Panetta, who represents the Salinas Valley and a Democrat from an agricultural area. And he was saying, he was a little boy, his dad was Leon Panetta, who some of you will remember was prominent in California politics, went on to be Secretary of Defense, worked in the White House for a long time, many years served his country. And little Jimmy Panetta, he says, we were coming into the Capitol parking house garage, and they'd been to the gym to work out, and somebody came out and they hugged and said, how you been? And he says, I got back in the car. He goes, I was like first grade, and I said to my dad, well, that must have been a Democrat. He goes, no, that was a Republican. We're just good friends. When did we lose that? We can disagree without being viscerally mean. And it bothers me. The old days, the Tip O'Neill, Ronald Reagan days of, we can fight like hell, we can disagree, we can argue our point, and we can go have a drink later. I'm sorry that we've got to a point that we have to disrespect one another, and that's the way we're successful in politics, because I think it's taken a lot of good people not willing to participate because of that approach, unfortunately. So that's enough of preaching on my soapbox. I still think that there's some really good people who serve at all levels. I admire people who, especially at the county level, you deal with lots of issues. I'm guessing many of you are there tonight, but also state and federally. And one of the things I think we've done in the Cattlemen's Association, I'm past president, I've been done 3 or 4 years, I lose track in this COVID world. But I think we saw a gradual recognition and effort that we had to broaden our reach and our outreach to people who typically were not people who understood us or were sympathetic. And we worked really hard on those kind of relationship work that it takes, getting to know people, inviting them to events, and not assuming that because they're from a different party, they wouldn't understand or be supportive of our issues. I'm naive and simplistic to suggest, or I don't want to be naive and simplistic to suggest that we're going to agree on all issues. I really want to just agree on the issues that are important to me as a rancher, right? Open space, protecting the land, being able to do what we have done for generations, do it the right way. I don't want to get into some of these other social issues, which I may not agree on, but I'm probably not going to impact anyway. I have to build relationships if I want people to understand the issues at work on my side. So that's true locally. It's really important in Sacramento, obviously, because many of our issues will be marginalized in many ways simply because they're from a rural area. And you say, well, why don't they just understand? We covered that a little bit earlier in that we represent very small number of people, constituents. So it's hard for us to take front and center in those discussions. So it's absolutely critical to think about things from another point of view. And it's really, I know one of the things that frustrates me, something that makes perfect common sense to me, to you in this room, and to your neighbors. Sacramento says, what? That doesn't make any sense. You haven't considered this issue or that issue. And they're so disconnected from what we do, we just get frustrated. We get angry appropriately, but we have never really figured out how to communicate why that's important. I'll jump back just a hair to fire. It's like, if you think about that, have you really got people outside of your representative? Have you ever made an effort to outreach and say, this is how we're really worried about what's happening to insurance rates. I don't care what the district is, or homes that are going to burn, or people who can't get support once they've lost everything. And so I think we have to really make an effort to reach out to people who disagree with us. The Cattlemen's Association, as I mentioned, has worked really hard on that. We've started to have just small get-togethers in some cases with 4 or 5 legislators or regulators, and just have a discussion of what's important to you in your district. This is what's important to us. And I've seen a change. Last year we were able to pass a few bills through that have been signed by Governor Newsom, which would surprise people. The Ag Pass legislation, which frankly that would sound like I'm taking credit, but I really pushed hard to get that started in our county, and it's morphed, and we worked on a bill, and that was passed through. I think that's a small step. It's an important one. We were able to move one through that was about liability for prescribed fire practitioners. It was signed. Those things wouldn't have happened without plenty of what I would call FaceTime and legislative work ahead of time. Sometimes when we visit the Capitol in Sacramento, we go in and say, here's my issues, please vote for them, and we walk out. Guess what? Everybody does that. Take a number. Everybody does that. You have to do it because it's kind of like the cattle call. And they dutifully have a staffer write it down. Cattlemen's Association came and here was their 5-minute pitch about these issues. Next came in was Picket, Nature Conservancy, or Friends of the Earth, or Make a List. They all came in, here's their 5 issues. It registers, but it doesn't make a difference. If they have a relationship with you, or they say, hey, somebody came in and was talking about the way you're measuring water on ranches and stock ponds, is that a problem? Well, then it's because they trusted you. And we've done very poor at that because we tend to talk to the people who agree with us, not the ones who disagree. And then federally, honestly, is, I think, even a more complex nightmare just because of scope. And in our case, they're so far away, they don't have a clue what's happening in the West. I mean, we have some good people back there who have Western approaches, but we think what makes perfect sense here doesn't work there. It doesn't translate to people who don't understand our ecosystem or where we are. I was on a call this morning about some proposed NEPA reforms from the Council of Environmental Quality, just having a discussion. And again, trying to make that relevant and real to people who are 3,000 miles away, who've only read NEPA documents, is really hard. The good thing about, well, the bad thing about Washington, D.C. is they're paralyzed. The good thing about Washington, D.C. is they're paralyzed. I mean, they can't do anything because they get such conflicting, competing, pushing agendas that there's very little done. And those are all we see, because we see them whether it's on Fox or MSNBC, and they're completely juxtaposed, conflicting messages, and these people are stuck in the middle. Somewhere we have to have that moderate voice that say, you know, what makes sense? You know, what's a compromise? Do you want 4 million acres to burn again next year in California? Or are there some things that we can work towards? Are there ways that we can approach this as a community with local voices? So I'm not a politician, nor do I want to be. And I appreciate the people, I tease them, but the fact that they're willing to listen to that many crazy people coming in their office, they deserve an award sometimes. But I really think we haven't done a great job reaching out to people who don't think like us. Comes back to the same theme I talked about later. Develop relationships with people who are not from your community or perspective. It's hard, it's slow, and I probably would be really bad at it had I not spent 40 years of my life around universities, where most people don't think like me. And so it gave me an opportunity to say, how can I build relationships and coalitions and discussion and move an agenda with people who typically wouldn't understand what I do? And I found that to be interesting, and I think it's proved to be beneficial. You don't always get your way, but I think my world is about incremental change. If you want to go in and say, let's get rid of NEPA, get over yourself. Don't waste my time. Don't waste the world's time. If you want to say, here's some meaningful changes, can we think about how to make them happen? I think you have a better shot. And I think sometimes we're so used to talking to one another that we never realize how hard it is once it gets out of our group. What makes perfect sense to everybody in this room and to me does not resonate well when you drop into Atherton. So I think politics are a challenge. I appreciate your engagement, but if you can connect with someone, if you can find 3 people who are not those who think like you and take them out and see your ranch or see your logging operation, show what they're doing, people you think would just be really disappointed in how you're treating things, it changes that. And buy them lunch and it's even better.
Well, among the pandemic chaos of 2020, dry regions of the country face deadly fires. That's why one cattle rancher took his concerns on wildfire management to Capitol Hill. Dr. Dave Daley chairs several committees on the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. He testified before a Senate subcommittee about the worsening western drought, which made last wildfire season one of the most destructive in years. Daley lost 80% of his herd in the Bear Fire. He said the state should implement practices like reseeding and prescribed burns, but he also told lawmakers a federal approach should not be one size fits all.
All of a sudden, it seems like we've got into this logging versus preservation debate rather than what can we do. As you well know, and as I've invited people, and you know this country, to come out and see the Sierra Nevada mountains, they are choked with brush. They are choked with low-growing fuels that are 10 to 15 high surrounding large conifers. We need programs that will address the opportunity to remove those in a cost-effective manner that can support, partner with private landowners, partner with public lands in ways that actually create defensible spaces. This cannot be, I certainly want to see communities hardened, resilient, but it has to be a much broader space when you see and witnessed what we have seen in Butte County, California, and throughout California.
Well, the committee members thanked Daley for his passion and said this is one of several hearings they'll hold this year.
One of the things I think many of us in your community, I'm sure, and in mine are most proud of are the generational relationships and how much that means to us to know that we've been part of this land for so long. I mentioned earlier that we came here as Irish immigrants in the 1850s and came to find a better place, starved out in Ireland like many were. And it's just really critical to me that we are both proud of and maintain that history and understand what people went through to be here. I'm fifth generation. My son and my two sons and daughter be sixth generation. One back with me on the ranch now, my daughter a veterinarian, my youngest son just got out of the Army, and now a granddaughter and a grandson due here in a couple of months. And just to make sure that they have an opportunity to do the same things, I think means a lot. And not just to me, I'm sure to all of you in the room. We don't do it just for us, we do it for them and for the future. And there's days that you wonder, wow, this isn't that easy, why should we? But it's, an example for me is I never expected nor asked my oldest son to come back or my daughter or my youngest son. They chose to, they wanted to. And I know it's true for many of you in your community. We just hope they have an opportunity to do it. It means a lot that they can. I touched on the fire earlier, and maybe I just give you a little more context there. And we talked about how quickly it moved and how hard that was. And I couldn't even get back in. We got a call on a Wednesday because I was over I'd stopped by the Orland Livestock and this fire had been burning a week. And I got a call from a cousin who said, the fire's in the middle of the cattle range. It's on the Lavatop. I said, no, it's not. Don't tell me that. That is not possible. It can't be there, because that was right in the middle. And every bad vision goes, I said it couldn't have been there. It's been 6 hours since it jumped the river. There's no way it moved that many miles in that length of time. And then the wind started to build, and we'd already had a massive north wind, and it's why the fire should have been put out before, because those winds were predicted. But at that point, when they're starting to hit 80-mile-an-hour winds at 100 miles, nothing's gonna happen. So I called my son and I said, we're going up. I met him and he goes, we're going up. And we had to cross Lake Oroville, the Enterprise Bridge, and head up into our high country, and you could watch it coming. And there were people trying to get out, and we're the only fools going up. We got up to what I call the entrance to our mountain range, which is a little town of Feather Falls, or used to be a town of Feather Falls, and saw one cow. Could see she had a baby calf because she'd been nursed and couldn't find it because there was a catch pen there, and you do what you can do. At the time, you have no idea what you're dealing with, and we just kept rolling. And we went another 6 or 8 miles, and behind fire line. And we met some SPI guys who I know quite well, and they said, and the CHP, sheriff, and everybody's leaving, some deer hunters, camps, and we're still going. And I got up quite a ways, And a friend from the SPI said, Dave, you can't. It's around the corner. It's coming. In fact, you need to get out of here. We all do now. So we had no choice. So we turned around, and it really was basically escape is what it was at that point. It wasn't salvage. But still in your mind, you're thinking, well, this is 100,000 acres. Maybe it burnt a strip coming through the center. You know, maybe there's going to be places the cows got away and that they survived, and that, you know, it can't have burnt the whole thing. That's just not possible in that length of time. And I know where there's a few meadows, and probably they got in the creek bottoms, or there's 2 or 3 fairly good sized rivers. They probably got in the river, and, you know, we're going to lose some cows, but it's not going to be complete devastation. It's just not possible. And so the next day we were locked out, entirely locked out, and couldn't go. And I couldn't get access. So I called the Forest Service and said, we got to get in. And the guy from Pennsylvania with the Forest Service called me back and said, well, where is this on the map? They had no clue, right? And well, maybe a week from now we can get you in if you're escorted. I said, thank you very much. I hung up the phone. And I called our local sheriff. Everything that works, works locally. Everything doesn't work comes federally. Sorry. You have to build local relationships. And I know our sheriff, and he's been really solid. He got us through the Oroville Dam crisis. He comes to our cattlemen's meetings. He said, Dave, I can't get you in tomorrow, but the next day I will, but you got to understand. He said, just tell me you won't do anything stupid. I said, oh, you know me, right? Won't do anything stupid. And he goes, well, just tell me you won't do anything stupid. I said, sure, because he knows me that I will. But he had a sheriff meet me at the roadblocks and escort me through every day for the next week to 10 days because we couldn't get in. And they would get me through the end of the roadblocks and say, okay, Dave, you're on your own. I wouldn't have got there without it. I had my family. My son got out of the Army. He took leave and flew home from Louisiana. My daughter, the vet, showed up. Some real close family friends. They're basically family, young guys who grew up with the kids. I said, you guys, we don't need any help. I didn't want anybody up there. And they said, that's not your choice, we're going. So we would head up there with about 4 stock trailers and 8 or 10 of us and 4-wheelers, and we were behind Indian fire lines. And I wouldn't suggest it's the best solution. It's why I think our Ag Pass program might be a better step than what we did, but we had no choice. And Kyle and I got up there the day before everybody got home, and we started down the hill into Fall River where we had a catch pan thinking, we'll find them. You know, we're gonna find some live cows. And all we saw is dead cows as we went along, just dead cows. And you got to the creek and they had died in the river in many cases. They were just running as far as they could. Hides, hooves, everything's gone. They're the ones that lived, you almost wish they hadn't, you know, because we had to euthanize a lot of cattle to get through it. And it's everywhere we went. We kept thinking, we'll get further, we'll get out of this fire line. And there were trees all over the road. We're trying to cut them out. He was pretty angry. I was pretty angry. It was stressful to say, what are we gonna find? Maybe we're gonna get further over, and it crossed a piece, and we're gonna find 30 or 40 head that didn't get touched. It didn't work like that. And it took us, so by then the next day everybody was here, and we took those trailers and went up there. It was just a nightmare. And one that will stick with you the rest of your life. To come across by then, you couldn't quite see buzzards, but you get a whiff of something dead and charred flesh and dead animal. And you'd stop, and my son was on front of me on a 4-wheeler, the one from the Army, and you know, your heads go up and you say, oh, we hope that's deer, we hope it's a bear. And no, it'd be a bunch of cows tumbled in a ravine with baby calves, all dead, all burnt. I hope they died quickly. They probably didn't in some cases. So it's pretty tragic. And again, we had those cows belled with, like many of you do down in that Stanislaus forest and the other forest down there, they put bells on to find those cows. Some of those bells have been in the family 100 plus years, 150 years. We found about 100 bells out of 400. There's still 300 up there that my granddaughter may find someday riding down a trail, I hope, that we're still there doing the same thing. My daughter, the vet, and my oldest son, the partner with me, they went another direction, and they ran across, it's really rough country and pretty good water, and they started seeing dead cows everywhere. They saw a cow still alive with her legs burnt off to her hocks laying in the water. Well, you know what you do as a rancher, you do the right thing, you euthanize her immediately. But it's burning and smoky and hard to see and dead cows everywhere. And so my son goes hiking up to look for more because he knows he'll find them. And my daughter's sitting there and sees a calf kick inside the cow. You know, that's tough. And as a veterinarian, they had pocket knives. She did an emergency C-section and the calf was still breathing as they pulled it out, but couldn't make it. That's the kind of tragedy that sticks with you. I saw these cows we find with their hides burnt off, their hooves burnt off. It's one of those things that you can't unsee. And for those of you who say, well, you know, maybe cows shouldn't have been up there, you know, would have been, same thing with wildlife. We saw bear in the middle of the road dead, fox, coyotes, mountain lions, all the things. Nothing should go through what those animals went through. And the smell of death sticks with you. We did this for about 12 days straight with maybe 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night, and you couldn't sleep. And by the end, you'd start to go to where the ravens were. The ravens or the buzzards. That was your signal that there may be something dead. You didn't know if it was going to be cows or bears or what it may be, but you knew death was what we had witnessed or will see. And the thing is that's so tragic to think of animals in that kind of situation. I've had people say, yeah, but you kill them to eat them. You can't even conflate the two, and you shouldn't. But I understand from an outside perspective. But the part that hit me later is we also killed an entire ecosystem. It wasn't just the wildlife, it was the 100-year-old, 200-year-old majestic trees that are gone. It was the new growth, it was everything will not be the same. And you know where all that runoff goes when it rains? Into Lake Oroville, into the California water supply. Isn't that amazing? Had we ever thought about what we would do to, so this is all connected, I guess is my point. It's about me personally, it's about that fire, it's about our legacy and what meant so much to us as a family, and then to see the rippling impacts beyond. Because we all see what it did to us and it will never be the same. I hate going up there, but I'm gonna go. And this year we're taking cows back. I will not quit. I won't be the one who quit. We'll go again. But we have to draw the relationship between this kind of catastrophes that we deal with, what's happening to rural communities, what's happened to insurance, because of how we've treated our national forest or not treated as appropriate. So build bridges, build relationships, listen to people who don't think like you, tell the stories even that are hard, but do it in a way to build bridges rather than to throw grenades as you move forward.